What's up YouTube, and welcome to episode 113 of Chaos Daily. Let's get into it. So if you've been following me on Twitter, you might have seen a couple days ago that all the parts for the monogull are finished. This is the first wing assembled. I've epoxied the carbon fiber rod through it. This is so strong. I don't know why I didn't do something like this with the Albatross. This is excellent. I'm going to do this for all future builds for planes. Like, there's so much stiffness in this wing. It's so nice and light. I love it. It's great. It's awesome. It's fantastic. Let's go through the process of doing this. But before we do, I had a question on the previous episode. Or was it on Twitter? Somebody asked me how much the all-up weight's going to be. I forget who it was. I'm sorry. Yeah, so my estimate is about 1.7 kilograms, but I didn't know until I could get one of these done. So let's chuck this on the scale and see how much one of the wings weighs, and we can add that to the 1 kilogram weight that we know the fuselage, battery, and EDF and all that weighs. So let's check it out. All right, I hope that shows up on the camera. Can we see that? Yeah, we can see that. Okay, let's stand this wing up and see if we can get a measurement on the weight. The balance. Yep. Yes. No. Maybe. All right. So that's what, 378 grams. 378.6 grams. That's not too bad. Right. So that puts the wings at roughly 760. So we're nearly at 1.8 kilograms to all up flying weight. That's a little unfortunate. It's a bit heavy, but hey, there's much lower wing loading on these wings. The chord length is much longer. It's, you just look at that. There's my hand for you. That's a big wing. But yeah, this turned out just amazing. This carbon fiber through here, the epoxy and everything. The process is a little bit tricky, but it did turn out all good. Everything ran smoothly. So we're going to run through the next wing and get started on that one. So let's get started. All right, so first step, you've got to get all the control surfaces off. At the moment, they're just press fit into these slots for these hinges. And I just got to unscrew the servos. So let's get started. Right, so servos are all out. These are on 3 separate pieces. All of these printed really nicely. So what I do is I take the resin that it's printed with. I take one of these hypodermis syringes that has a blunt tip. This is what they call a draw up needle. It's for drawing up stuff. Fill this with a bit of resin, and I got this nice UV torch, and then I just basically apply where I want it, add the torch, and go along and weld the whole thing together. Now this one, I created these raised rings. See there? And they slot into the corresponding holes here. I don't normally do this for all the pieces. This adds extra weight that I don't necessarily need, but because there's no carbon fiber running between these two pieces, I'm just adding this to make sure that everything lines up correctly when I use this method to weld stuff together. Get it all nice and lined up. Make sure I apply pressure. Pick a spot. And then you just hold the torch on it for a little while. So once I've got it initially tack welded, I just go around, see where any of the gaps are. These gaps are fine. It works better if there's a bit of a gap and you get the resin to cure deeper on in, and then you can add more resin to fill the gap, and then you get basically the resin welds deeper in as well as further out. Just using the side of the rod of the needle tube to smooth it out. All right, so once you got it nicely cured, this isn't 100% cured. I'm still gonna go put this under a UV light or stick it under the sun for a little while, make sure that we get some penetration of the UV light to cure it all the way through. But while it's at this stage, it's much easier to just trim off that excess where you get bits of where it bulges a little bit. Just scraping it with a knife or using a file or a bit of sanding block. I like using the knife because it just scrapes away the raised area and doesn't damage any of the area around it. And there you go. What was 2 pieces is now 1 piece. So I will chuck this under the sun for a little while, and then I will repeat the same process for this piece, and then we can move on to the next step. All right, so had it sitting in the sunlight for a little while. During the day, I usually use the sun to get deep penetrating cures. After I finish printing, I use my UV curing chamber. It gives a more even cure all the way around. But for this sort of thing where I'm trying to join pieces together, I need the UVB and UVB and C that you get from sunlight. You get more UVC than you do B. B gets trapped in the atmosphere. I can never remember this correctly. I could be wrong. Don't take my word for it. Go look it up for yourself. Most of the UV light that comes from sunlight gets blocked in the Earth's atmosphere, but the stuff that is more penetrating is what you need to penetrate through the resin to get it to cure at a deeper level. The difference between the different UV wavelengths doesn't have so much of a difference in effect to how the photo initiator kicks off and starts polymerization. From what I've researched, there isn't actually much different in that way. In that regard, what you find is you get different results in curing from the power output of the light or the light source, the amount of power that is dumped, how much light is actually provided at that point in time changes the statistical chemical reaction rate, and it's that rate of reaction that changes the material property of the polymerization at the end, not so much the wavelength. So yeah, putting it in the sunlight gets me a deeper cure, so that the resin that's below the surface cures. So next up is to bond this carbon fiber to this edge, this flat surface here. I've already sanded this flush, so that should work nicely. I've also scuffed up the carbon fiber. You can see it's no longer glossy. This will help the epoxy stick to it. So let's get on to that. So this step's a little bit trickier. I am using 5-minute epoxy. This is the cheapest stuff I can get my hands on at the moment. So I'm gonna mix some of this up and we're gonna get it on there. You can see I've got all sorts on the bench. I've got these hair ties. These are to help clamp the carbon fiber to the wing when I'm doing that, because it's a strange shape. I can't really get the clamps that I've got on here and get even pressure all along. So hair ties, they work great. You can use rubber bands, but I find rubber bands actually bond to the epoxy that leaks out the edges more. This sort of material that's around the outside of it, yes, it bonds, but when you go to pull this off, this will come off the epoxy much better than a rubber band will. A rubber band will leave bits of itself behind. So let's get some of this mixed up. Pretty cold today, so this is stiff. I'm waiting for this bubble to move, so when I squeeze, I get an even amount out. So let me get a heat gun and warm this up a bit. It's a little bit warmed up now, so it should be easy to work with. But now that it is warmer, I have to work faster because it's going to kick off like real quick. And there we go. You have to work bloody quick to get it right. I mean, it was just starting to kick off as I stuck it on there, so I hope it worked out all right. I think it did. When I laid it down and rolled it and the other side came up, that's a good sign. That means it stuck to it nicely. So this should be a good adhesion. I'm just going to leave this overnight, 24 hours. Get this episode out for you guys, and then tomorrow I'll be trimming this off and applying the other side. So there you go. Hopefully that shows some of the process that I used to make the wing. Like I said, I still have to attach the leading edge, but I'm going to let the epoxy cure for 24 hours before doing that. It's another epoxy bond on the front side of that carbon fiber as well. So leave it for 24 hours, make sure it sets, and get the next one going. So yeah, a couple other things that I've been doing. I wanted to test out the paint. I want to make this thing a glossy white, so shiny and glossy and white that we're going to have to come up with a new name for white that is whiter than white. And glossy white. The new name for glossy white. Anyways, but more than that, I needed to check if the enamel paint that I had on hand would work with the resin and wouldn't react with it. So I sprayed up one of these failed prints to see what it looks like. I didn't do any prep on the surface or anything, so there's all sorts of crap on it, and yeah. But in places where it turned out all right, like I said, I hadn't sanded the surface or anything, it turned out really nice. So I hope that you can see that. You can see some of the layers, the print layers here. So it did turn out pretty good, even though it was like just a rush job. I just wanted to check the paint was safe with the resin, but all in all, it turned out pretty good. So yeah, this gives you an idea of what the rest of the plane is going to look like, but I'm going to go with a full automotive paint job, which means a lot of sanding, a lot of prep, a lot of work, because I want it just to look gorgeous, just slick and gorgeous and beautiful. I think it'll be well worth it, even if it crashes. We don't want it to crash though. We're planning on not crashing, not like the last time. New receiver is still on its way, hasn't arrived in the post, so fingers crossed for that. But anyways, yeah, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you're subscribed if you're not. As always, I've been Chaos, and until next time, expect the unexpected, and I will see you guys later.
And a special thank you to all my patrons that help support the channel. If you would also like to support the channel, there's a link in the description.